Okay, so let's go back a bit. Remember the early 2000s? Man, that was the absolute golden age for parody movies. I mean, films like Scary Movie, they weren't just comedies, they were huge cultural events. But then, somewhere along the line, the whole genre just kind of fell off a cliff. So what the heck happened? Well, it turns out a reaction to a brand new fan-made Scary Movie trailer might just give us the answer. Let's dive in. And that really is the big question, right? How did a genre that was a total box office giant just disappear? The reaction we're going to break down today actually gives us some really interesting clues. And honestly, they point to a much, much bigger problem with comedy today. All right, so before we can even talk about what's wrong, we've got to set the bar. We need a benchmark. And the original Scary Movie franchise, I mean, when it was good, it was brilliant. The guys in the video we're looking at, they had this huge nostalgic love for it, which is exactly why their reaction to this new trailer tells us so much. And this quote right here, it sets that standard perfectly. See, the hosts we're talking about, they aren't just casual fans. No way. They love the early films. One of them had literally just rewatched Scary Movie 3 and was just blown away by how good it still is. He was calling the jokes top tier and totally on point. So you see, that's the super high bar we're measuring this new stuff against. Okay, so with that really high standard locked in our minds, let's get to the main event. This is the whole reason we're doing this explainer, the reaction to a fan-made trailer for a Scary Movie that's supposedly coming in 2026. Now, this thing brought back all the original characters, so you can imagine hopes were through the roof. But did it actually deliver? So they watched the whole thing. It's packed with all these old faces, all these new references. What was that immediate gut reaction? And yeah, there it is. Just a simple, kind of brutal verdict. Look, they got a few small laughs out of it, but the main feeling, just disappointment. This was not the big comeback everyone was hoping for. But the real question is, why? And to figure that out, we've got to break down the jokes.
All right, so if we really want to understand why this trailer failed, we've got to put the comedy itself under the microscope. The hosts in our source video did exactly that. They picked apart a couple of specific jokes, and honestly, their critiques show us exactly where modern parody movies go off the rails.
Okay, Exhibit A. Here's the first joke. It's clearly trying to be edgy, tap into all the political and social stuff going on right now. And on the surface, yeah, that feels like classic Scary Movie. But the problem they found goes way deeper than just the topic. And this is the key insight right here. The problem wasn't that the joke was too offensive or anything like that. It was just lazy. The hosts basically said it was just hitting the obvious. There's no clever setup, no punchline that makes you go, oh, it just lacked any kind of craft. It's like they just took the most basic surface-level observation and turned it into a line. All right, moving on to Exhibit B. Another joke trying to be super topical, this time about pronouns. And again, you'd think this is a subject that's totally right for some smart satire. But this reaction really just sums up the whole problem. It was basically a big sigh of, really? That's it? It just felt like such a missed opportunity. Instead of finding a genuinely clever or funny way to tackle it, the joke just kind of points at the topic and stops. There's no wit there, it's just a reference, that's all. Now, what's really interesting is that there was one moment that got a real, genuine laugh. It was a character getting absolutely launched by a car and just flying through the air. So why did that work? Well, because it's a perfect ragdoll joke. It's just pure, simple slapstick. It doesn't need to be topical or clever about current events. It's just universally funny. And that's a really telling contrast, isn't it? And all of this really leads to a bigger diagnosis of the problem. It feels like the whole trailer was just banking on us remembering the old characters and feeling nostalgic. It was leaning super heavily on that instead of, writing good new jokes. And that is such a classic trap for these kinds of sequels. The host drew a really clear line right down the middle of the Scary Movie franchise itself. They were all praised for the early movies, saying the parody was super sharp. But then they talked about parts 4 and 5 and called them hard to watch and out of date. And the big consensus was that this new fan trailer felt like it fit right in with those weaker sequels. So, okay, let's zoom out from just this one trailer. What does all this tell us about comedy as a whole? Is the entire genre just doomed? Well, maybe not. The guys in the source video suggest we might be seeing the very, very early stages of a long, slow climb back. I mean, this quote just says it all, doesn't it? It perfectly captures this feeling that comedy isn't having some big, triumphant return. No, it's like it's painstakingly clawing its way back into being relevant again. It's a super fragile, really difficult process, and we're only just now starting to see the first tiny signs of life. And they actually point to a few examples, like movies called Fakamal and The New Naked Gun, as these first little baby steps. They kind of group them all together in this infancy of comedy phase. Look, they're probably not going to be masterpieces, right? But they are an attempt to bring back this kind of parody movie. It's a start, but man, we have a long, long way to go. And that brings us to the final, big question that kind of hangs over all of this. The hosts wrapped up their chat by wondering, maybe what we really need is a comedy that just isn't afraid to cross all the lines again. It's a pretty provocative thought, right? In today's world, is it even possible to make a movie with that same unapologetic, super edgy spirit of the original Scary Movie? And maybe more importantly, is that what it would take to actually save the parody genre for good?